Continuing with the ideas about the system and systems approaches, let's introduce the concept of elements. As stated above, a system can be defined as a group of interacting, interrelated or interdependent elements forming a complex whole with a purpose or function in general. The structure of human environment systems is, in other words, largely made up by elements and relationships between elements. There are many ways to categorize elements, and I present one typology in chapter 6, which we already looked at, which is helpful when analyzing what constitutes the capacity of a human environment system to perform functions that contribute to its resilience. This typology is, in other words, oriented toward grasping the capacity of a system to achieve a set of objectives. If you take the teleological approach, you say, is the system designed for the purpose, or is the system somehow put together and then it finds a purpose? So that's my philosophy for today. However, to be able to describe the system in the first place, it may be helpful to first consider the composition of elements more generally. For that, we may need a composition-oriented typology. So here are two typologies of elements. So these are composition-oriented typologies. So capacity-oriented typology and composition-oriented typology. Knowledge, skills, tools, and other resources. So these are the elements in this category of capacity orientation. Organization on all levels, rules, regulations, and other formal institutions, which is what we will focus on in the book by Andries and Janssen, called Sustaining the Commons. Norms, values, and other informal institutions. So they tend to put this in the context of action, action arena, action situations, and participants in the action situation, and how norms, values, and other informal institutions work. I think you have some idea. I already mentioned this before. If you're going to the market to buy something, that's an action situation. There is a vendor, you are the buyer, and this is an informal institution. The vendor knows the rules, you know the rule and how it works, and you know what you want to buy and which shop to go to, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, composition-oriented typology is about agents, artifacts, and natural objects. So slightly expanding on that, agents are the actors in that context, and artifacts are, some things that are, let's say, human constructed elements, and natural objects. So you could be buying vegetables or fruits. Well, even those are not so natural anymore, but anyway, let's move on and see what the book is trying to say. Axelrod and Cohen suggest that systems elements can be divided into agents and artifacts. An agent is here a person, family, group, organization, government, or any kind of entity that has the ability to interact with its environment, including other agents. So you can put that as action situation in the other construct. An agent has objectives and can take action proactively or reactively with or without an intended purpose. The main properties of an agent are where it operates, so the location, how it can affect the system, capabilities, and what impressions it can bring what impression it can bring forward from past experiences, so memory. Hence, agents in a human environment system span everything from the national government to a farmer in a remote area, all depending on the purpose and level of the analysis. An artifact, on the other hand, is an object made by a human being, as I said, human construct, and used for particular purposes by agents in the system. An artifact has a location and a certain function in the system, but lacks its own objectives and memory. However, the functions of an artifact are not restricted to what creating agent intended. For instance, a house is most likely intended to provide shelter but may collapse, trap, and kill agents in an earthquake. So you have to be careful. Its purpose, designed with a purpose, but not infinitely robust to continue to give you the function no matter what the situation is. Although the agency of human beings have redesigned or at least affected much in the environment, there are still elements that are important parts of human environment systems but cannot easily be defined as artifacts. This sounds complicated, but the examples make it very clear. For example, mountains, lakes, rivers, sand dunes, wind, wild trees, insects and animals, rocks, steep slopes, etc. These elements can be referred to as natural objects, which have the same main properties as artifacts and comprise anything in the system that's not created by human beings and may or may not be used by the agents. So rocks are sitting there, let's say a mountain is sitting there, a dune is sitting there, formed, doesn't necessarily have a function, but it can sit there forever, or you can use it. You can go hiking in the desert, hiking on a mountain, you can make a carving into a rock, you can paint on the rock or write silly things about how someone loves someone and so on and so forth. Okay, so you get the idea. Now we'll look at the typology of dependencies. So when you have elements, the elements interact and depend on each other and feedback, react, proact, and so on. In addition to elements, the structure of human environment systems is also made up by relationships between elements. These relationships may be of various kinds, but for them to have any significance for human environment systems, they must convey changes of some kind between elements. In other words, the state of one element must be dependent on the state of the element it has a relationship with. Such relationships are therefore often referred to as dependencies, which are unidirectional, and when two elements are dependent on each other, they are referred to as being interdependent, right? The watch gives you the time. It's designed to give you time. It has really no other function, but you can use it. You are dependent on it, and the watch is not dependent on you unless it requires a battery to run or something, right? Or a winding. In many instances, it's rather straightforward to grasp more tangible dependencies, such as a child being dependent on his parent or her parent for food, or a train being dependent on a communication system. However, other dependencies are no less real, even if it's not as visible. In order to facilitate a more comprehensive understanding of dependencies, it helps to divide them into four categories: physical dependencies, informational dependencies, like cyber in original terminology it was called cyber dependency, geographical dependencies, and logical dependencies. Okay, so this is a clear physical dependency, a Russian train being physically dependent on electricity. We know all about it, we know how to design it, we know how to make sure that the dependency works. So the energy itself doesn't depend on the train, but the train depends on the electricity and the grid and the cables that connect to the train and make the train engine run, and so on and so forth. The next category of dependencies is information dependencies. Did I jump there? Physical? Yeah, not. I'll try to cover all of them, but if I miss something, you can message me. The next category of dependencies is information dependencies. An information dependency is a dependency in which the state of one element in the human environment system depends on information transmitted from another element. For example, an ATM is not only dependent on electricity to function, so that's the physical dependency, but also on a steady flow of information concerning bank and account details and cash being reloaded. It's suggested that this type of dependency is a result of the comparatively recent process of automation and computerization, which may hold for the critical infrastructures. The typology was okay, let me make sure that sentence makes sense. It is suggested that this type of dependency is a result of the comparatively recent process of automation and computerization, which may hold for the critical infrastructures the typology was initially constructed for. Okay, I just have to emphasize it in the right way. However, information dependencies were common in human environment systems long before the individual revolution, as vital information has been communicated since the dawn of humankind. So information is not new. The way it is transmitted, created, and used is new. So the dependencies or information are evolving over time. Although information dependencies are closely related to physical dependencies, as it may be possible to view the information in itself as a commodity in a similar way to electricity. However, it is beneficial to separate information dependencies from the physical dependencies, since mixing them may result in the often less tangible information dependencies being seen as less important or even forgotten. So we talked about climate denial, for example, and talked about deliberate agents who are trying to create confusion or spread misinformation and so on. So there is a possibility that some people depend on that information for their action to take care of risks, reduce exposures, be on the path to sustainable development, or work with organizations to make that happen, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back and look at more dependencies, the others that we just defined. This is only 11 minutes, but that's okay. We will continue in the next podcast. Okay.